Hello, BookTube. You may have noticed that Matthew at Mayberry Book Club and I are doing a read-along of an unconventional nature. We went from a work of literature to a work of pop culture. We are reading Frank Miller's Batman Dark Knight Returns, which came out in the 1980s as four discrete square-bound comic book issues. So it lends itself to a four-part read-along for the month of May. Last time we did part one, as usual with these read-alongs with Matthew at Mayberry Book Club. I'll leave a link to his video down below. As usual, it's a book that he hasn't read, that I have read many, many times. So I get the thrill of introducing him to the world of Frank Miller's imagination, of his imagining of a story in which years have passed and an older Batman, a Batman in his early 50s, Bruce Wayne has decided to return as Batman. He left the scene. He retired 10 years ago when the story starts, was the last confirmed sighting of the Batman. And in that time, Gotham City has gone to hell. It is a rancid, horrible place. And it is, as this story opens, plagued by a gang, the mutants, the mutant gang. They have the Cyclops visor from Marvel Comics is the X-Men. And they are an extremely well-armed anarchist gang who they hate law and order. They claim that Gotham belongs to them. Their thugs turn up everywhere and commit all sorts of crimes. And that first issue shows that they are a plague on the city and that they are growing out of control. They are gunning for Police Commissioner Jim Gordon, who is not far from retirement, and there doesn't seem to be much that he can do about them. And their leader, the leader of the mutant gang, often makes shadowy pronouncements on an illicit TV channel saying that he is going to carry Gordon's head through the streets, that Gotham belongs to the mutant gang or whatnot. And in that first issue, the threat of the mutant gang is out there, sure. But the main problem in that issue is the return of one of Batman's supervillains, Two-Face. And the issue is mainly concerned with Batman figuring out what's going on, figuring out Two-Face's crime, thwarting it, and then defeating Two-Face. Raises the open question for a lot of readers, both in the 1980s when it came out and now, of a niggling kind of nerdy nature, which is, if Batman retired 10 years ago, why hasn't Gotham City been completely run by, not mutant gangs, but Batman's supervillains? Were they all conveniently in Arkham Asylum when he retired? Did he put the last one in there and say, oh, that's that? They escape all the time. Why isn't Gotham at the mercy of the Penguin or the Riddler or Poison Ivy? And why haven't they been all this time without Batman to stop them? If he can retire and they'd retire too, then why didn't he retire a long time ago? But one way or another, we meet a Bruce Wayne in that first issue he's drinking heavily, he is doomed, he is despairing, and he is brought back to the Cape and Cowl by revisiting his origin story about okay, well, according to Frank Miller, Batman has two origins, maybe three. In the comic books, Bruce Wayne as a boy has his parents murdered in front of him, and it traumatizes him, and later on, after he has studied the world and traveled and become a great detective and a great athlete, he has to figure out a way to strike back at the criminal underworld when a bat flies through the window of stately Wayne Manor, and he says, the criminals are a cowardly, superstitious lot, I shall become a bat. So he puts on a costume and becomes the Batman and terrorizes Gotham's underworld. That's an origin story. Frank Miller says that long before there was that inciting incident where Bruce Wayne's parents are killed in front of him, he had already been so-called chosen by a supernatural bat force, but not just a bat, but the oldest, fiercest warrior breathing rancid breath of centuries, an ancient supernatural bat that possesses him, basically, that takes him over. That's another origin story, and according to that story, Bruce Wayne was always going to be Batman, and it didn't have anything to do with the execution of his parents. I showed you in my video for part one that in Frank Miller's vision of the night when Bruce Wayne's parents are killed, he sees that bat flying over the rooftops of Gotham before a shot is fired, and has already met that bat in what would later become the Batcave. So, how important the tragedy is in Miller's view, I really don't know. and no one has ever been able to make any real sense out of the fact that the traumatizing incident happens to Batman when he's 8, and he doesn't become Batman until he's 20 or older than that. No one's ever been able to make sense of that. That's not typically how a psychotic overreaction works. I saw one piece of Batman fan fiction years ago that posited that in the intervening years he was a supervillain. That it drove him insane, and that's why he had such an instinctive understanding of all the outre supervillains that he faces as Batman, because he had been one of them before that. But one way or another, that first chapter in Batman Dark Knight Returns is Batman facing down Two-Face. And there are really two elements involved that could speak to a longer story. One never fails. I'm not going to shout over it. I'll just wait. And hope that it's not one of 30. It never fails, though. A few of you have pointed out, even just recently, in fact, a couple of new people who've never watched my channel before have said, every time you make a video, there is a hugely loud, piercing siren noise. Where on earth do you live? And all I want to say to them is, if you think that it's noticeable after the handful of videos that you've watched, try watching 5 years of that with it happening in every single video. Nevertheless, there are two strands in that first chapter that look like they speak to a longer storyline. Only two. Batman Dark Knight Returns Chapter 1 does not end with a cliffhanger. But the two strands are, one, you don't come to a big Batman miniseries, a much hyped Batman miniseries, for Two-Face. You don't come for Two-Face, right? You come for the Joker. And the Joker is in that first issue for a couple of panels. Readers of that first issue could easily have thought, okay, well, this means that there's going to be more of the Joker later on. But we don't get it in that first issue. And the other hint at a larger plot is the mutants themselves. Batman never addresses them. He never deals with them in the course of that first issue. They are a plague on Gotham City. Next to them, Two-Face is a minor distraction. But Batman doesn't address them. Instead, he concentrates on Two-Face. And a lot of people after that first issue came out said, this is my problem with Batman. He ignores things, crimes and evils that are afflicting ordinary people in order to fight these weird supervillains that don't affect anybody, or that only affect everybody because they're around, not because they're here every day. One way or another, you go into the second issue in the series legitimately wondering what more is going to happen. I mean, the first issue seems almost neatly wrapped up. What could possibly happen in the second issue? Well, you can tell from the cover that something happens in the second issue, because Batman needs to see his tailor and his orthodontist. But in this second issue, we get a sense of the larger strands that Frank Miller is going to concentrate on for the rest of the series. Jim Gordon, Police Commissioner Gordon, is on his way out as police commissioner. We don't really know when he's on his way out. On this page, one panel right there, you see it's these 4-panel pages, and with one panel in this line, the network talking head says Gordon, facing mandatory retirement later this week, has offered to stay on the job until the mutant crisis has been resolved. That's in this panel. And then the panel directly below it says, with a scant 6 hours remaining, the question in the air hangs, who will replace Jim Gordon? So, is it the end of the week, or is it the end of the day? We don't really know, one way or another. At the beginning of this issue, Jim Gordon is on the edge of retirement. That is a external pressure that is working on the plot. We get the requisite Frank Miller glorification of smoking. He loves to write about how horrible it is. It's just so horrible. My cigar does its usual, and I cough up a load of the brown stuff. Isn't that the coolest thing in the world? Don't you want to be Jim Gordon? Absolutely. Absolutely you do. Boy, oh boy. There's nothing cooler than this. It shows in the course of this, and also in Batman Year One. It shows in the course of this that if you're serious, whether you're seriously evil or you're seriously not, well, there's one thing you'd better do to show it. Ridiculous. But the issue starts with that, and with the question of who's going to replace Jim Gordon, and deal not only with the mutants, but with Batman. A big element that's in these early chapters is the furor over the return of Batman. Everyone's talking about the fact that Batman is back, and is that a good thing? Is he good for society? He's beating up criminals. Is he good for society? And in the course of at the beginning of this issue, there is a plot. a chewing gum air baby has been kidnapped for ransom by a bunch of mutants, by a bunch of the criminal gang that rule Gotham City. And Batman is hunting them. So the plot is going on, talking about all sorts of other things while we see him hunting them in great images like that, great visuals like that. He's getting closer and closer to finding where the baby is and where his kidnappers are. Something else is happening in the background. Another subplot is happening. A little girl named Carrie has seen reports of Batman returning. In fact, she saw Batman, was one of the first people to see him in that first issue. And unlike scaring her or making her argue the pros and cons of vigilantism, it has inspired her. Her parents are kind of feckless and self-absorbed stoners. She wants more out of life than what she has, and she makes the biggest possible decision. She decides to become Robin. She doesn't have any idea how to jump around on fire escapes or rooftops, and she has no one to train her. She basically trains herself. But while that's happening, the mutant leader is being more and more vocal about how he wants to kill Batman, how he wants to kill Jim Gordon, how he wants to kill Jim Gordon's replacement. And Batman doesn't seem so much concerned with it at first. He's more concerned with the problem at hand, which is, look at that image, isn't that awesome? With saving this baby. And you're wondering this whole time at the change in tone, the change in what Batman seems like in this issue. Michael K. Vaughan, when he did a video about the first volume of this, he's joining the read-along here. He made a very good point when he said Batman is not the Punisher. And even some diehard Batman fans or Punisher fans might have a hard time actually describing why that isn't true. It absolutely is true that Batman is not the Punisher, but why isn't he? What is the difference? This issue isn't 5 pages deep before we see that Frank Miller is not so concerned with that. Because when he gets to these kidnappers, some of you who watch the Batman in the movies will recognize punching his way through a wall behind a gunman. He then uses that gunman's gun to kill the man holding the baby. Just shoot him dead. And take the baby into his arms. Now, we are told that the gun that he is using is an M60 in this panel. That he's using an M60. An M60 is not a precision weapon. If you fire at a man who's holding a baby to his breast, you are going to kill them both. But it doesn't matter. The point is, Batman uses a gun to kill someone when he didn't need to. There are 8 million ways he could have saved this baby, and he doesn't do it. And that's right at the beginning of this issue, and no one had ever seen that before in a Batman comic book. And the sop of rationalization is that he doesn't bring a gun to the scene himself. He uses someone else's gun. That's not much of a sop. He kills someone. Batman doesn't kill. But one way or another, he kills someone and he smiles while he does it. He cracks a joke when he does it. And the debate goes on. Is it a good idea for Batman to be back? Is it a good idea for him to be preying on criminals? Now, the whole time he does this, Carrie is training as Robin and getting better as she goes along. But you have experts coming on, psychiatrists coming on, including the one who tried to rehabilitate Harvey Dent. And you also have a spokesman for the president. Comes on. He has the same rictus grin. His panel very consciously doesn't change. As he says that the president knows all the ruckus that's being kicked up by Batman, and believe you me, he cares, but he's not going to get involved and stomp all over local authorities. Here, let me see. Let me see if I can plug in this phone. It is ominously low. I don't want it to run out of power while I'm making this video, because all of my deathless oratory would be wasted. I think that will work. Anyway, the problem will be holding up pictures to show you. But yeah, we've got that president, the presidential spokesman, and that sent a skitter down my spine, because if the government's going to get involved, then what does that mean? But I didn't know how bad it was going to get. I'm in for the worst of it, and I will show it to you. The mutants keep on going. They keep making trouble. And Batman comments. He captures one of them, strings him up over Gotham City, way over the city, in order to question him about where the mutants are getting this military firepower. Where are they getting ordnance like this to terrorize the city? And it turns out they're getting it from a general, a high-placed general who is selling guns to the mutants, and who Batman convinces to take his own life. This is one of those big panels that Frank Miller occasionally does to spice up these otherwise crowded pages. Batman realizes who is supplying them with weapons, and also all sorts of details about the weapons distribution. And that's the way that he knows that he has to take on this mutant menace directly. He knows they've been supplied with military ordnance, so they are a genuine threat to Gotham City. And he decides to go and find them. It turns out they're in the Gotham dump. The dump stretches out of sight from the far bank of the West River. I'm told it ends somewhere before the farmlands. It smells of rot and rust. It's a breeding ground for insects and rodents. Batman decides to go and confront the mutants on their own home ground. And we see the mutant leader. He's no longer in shadows. He's a horrifying figure. Filed his teeth down to spikes. A horrifying figure with a carefully armed militia, with the silhouette of Gotham in the background, saying to them, we have the weapons, we have the training, we have the nerve. Gotham belongs to us. More of them than there are of the police department. Batman knows that and acknowledges it. They might win if they marched on Gotham. They might take over. Batman decides to confront them directly, using the Batmobile. That's what you called it, Dick. Again, he's addressing Dick Grayson, the first Robin. Kind of a name a kid would come up with. They don't even wait for the order. Young people these days. No respect for history. I modified her during some nasty riots 15 years ago. The only thing I know of that can cut through her hide isn't from this planet. The mutants use hand grenades. They use rocket launchers. Something bounces off the hull that must have come from a bazooka. They do each other a lot of damage. They can't hurt him. The Batmobile, this new Batmobile, is completely impregnable to them. And he is shooting them down the whole time, mounted guns. And look at the cynicism. I don't know if you can read that. The line says, rubber bullets. Honest. Meaning they're not. And there's no mention of rubber bullets made in the news reports of this slaughter at the dump. This is a Batman who kills. This is a Batman who shoots people. Who mows them down when they are no threat to him. And who never comes up with another alternative. And that's a shock. That is a big shock. That is a real change from even the Batman that we saw in the first issue, and certainly from the canonical realization of Batman. Until the slaughter is done, the dump is, the last shots have stopped echoing, but the moans and cries will continue long into the night. And the only thing left in front of him is the mutant leader himself, who's facing the guns of the Batmobile, and Batman could wipe him out with one touch of a button. But something gets to him. Something very Frank Miller gets to him. I want to read you this. I can't think of a single reason to let him live, except he's got exactly the kind of body I wish he didn't have. Powerful, without enough bulk to slow him down. Every muscle a steel spring ready to lash out. And he's young, in his physical prime. And I honestly don't know if I could beat him. And Alfred, who is monitoring, the butler Alfred, who is monitoring the operation of the Batmobile from a distance, from Wayne Manor, notices that the weapons have been shut down, that the vessel is opening. And asked over the intercom, he asks Batman what's going on. And Batman says, can't have a back door, Alfred. Might be tempted to use it. And Alfred says, sir, you can't be serious. He'll kill you. And it doesn't matter. Batman leaps to the fray. There's another full panel spread there. Notice that Miller makes him look young. He's big, he's stocky, but he doesn't look old. He doesn't look even older. He looks like Batman that you would find in a 1950s comic book. Eager with his fists to teach this villain a lesson. One-on-one, man-to-man. And Carrie is there at the dump. She is cheering him on when he attacks the mutant leader. And in the course of a page, it goes wrong, because this is a much younger man who is in perfect peak physical condition, and he starts to beat Batman. He starts to win, and picks up a crowbar to make it official, to just beat the daylights, to beat Batman to death right there in the dump. Just beat him until he's dead. It's only Carrie leaping forward as Robin to distract the villain for a minute, long enough for Batman to gas him, that saves his life. Otherwise, Batman Dark Knight Returns would have ended with this issue. And Carrie helps to lug Batman onto the waiting Batmobile. Alfred is not there. He's only there over the intercom. He's not there in person. He helps to lug him onto the Batmobile, where they can make their way to the Batcave with Carrie. who introduces herself as Carrie Kelly, and then with a huge gulp, the bravest thing she's ever done, calls herself Robin. And Batman agrees. He's been beaten almost to death, but he agrees. So he has survived. Most of the mutants are wounded, and the mutant leader is now in custody. He was found unconscious after this ruckus at the dump was discovered by the police. Batman is gone from the scene and is headed back to the Batcave to recover. But something happens. We get a page break, during the aftermath of this whole slaughter at the dump. And it's the page break I was dreading when I read the first issue of this. I was hoping I would never see this. And it happens. I will never forget when I saw this page, the sinking feeling that I felt. Our action shifts to the White House, with the American flag fluttering, and a president who starts every single sentence with, well, I like medals. I might be a little corny, but I think horses at the ranch really answer all of life's questions. Don't you, son? The president is talking to someone as we get closer and closer to the waves of the flag until they resolve into the S of Superman's costume. As the president tells him, you don't have to bring this fella in, but ride him around the corral a few times. Settle him down. Go to Gotham and fix this here problem. Well, I certainly love medals. Do you want a medal, son? Go and settle it down. Your country thanks you. And Superman says, yes, sir. That gave me a hint of that gives us a hint of what is going to be another plot in Dark Knight Returns, but it doesn't happen in this episode. That we get one chilling precursor of it, but other than that, no. Instead, for our purposes, two things happen that are a sign of things to come. Number one is that while all this is going on, the psychiatrist who tried to rehabilitate Harvey Dent, Two-Face, fixes on someone else to rehabilitate, and it's the Joker, who is safely locked away in Arkham Asylum. And this psychiatrist is saying, all I want is to show people that there is hope. All I'm asking for, he's talking to the administrator of Arkham Asylum, he's saying, all I'm asking for is 5 minutes. That's all. I want to make an appearance on a TV show for 5 minutes to show people rehabilitation works. And we see the Joker sobbing while the psychiatrist is encouraging him. The Joker is sobbing and saying, sir, I urge you to reject Dr. Walper's suggestion. I don't deserve this charity. My crimes were horrible beyond all words. I am beyond redemption. Please just lock me away from human memory. Sob. You know the Joker doesn't mean it. You can see that he doesn't mean it. Anyone can see that he doesn't mean it, but not this psychiatrist. Miller hates experts. If you have a credential framed on your wall, he hates you. You are a fraud. So we know that's coming. The other subplot is a drastic change in Batman. Even the Batman we've already seen from Frank Miller. You could see it already in the fact that, first of all, that he fights like a mindless bruiser and gets his ass handed to, but also that he killed someone. He's killing people, lots of someone. He's killing people that he doesn't need to kill. We get great visuals when the Batmobile brings Carrie to the Batcave. First, one from a long distance. Look at that. You can follow the motion lines of it without anything as crude as a motion line. There is the huge Batmobile dwarfed by the cave that it is traveling through. And we get this. Look at that. That is brilliant artwork. She and her astonished look are way down here. But we're not seeing what she sees just yet. We're seeing her looking. That is wonderful. It sets us up perfectly for this. Look at that panel. Look at the size of the Batcave. It's enormous. The Batmobile, we've already seen how big it is. It's dwarfed by the cave as they go in. And we get the voiceover narration. The cave. I left them behind me. I leave it all behind me. I go to the dark place, where I first met you. Before my parents died, learned I am what I am. I'm dying, but I can't die. I'm not finished yet. And you're not finished with me. Then something shuffles out of sight. Something sucks the stale air and hisses, gliding with ancient grace, eyes gleaming untouched by love or joy or sorrow, breath hot with the taste of fallen foes, the stench of dead things, damned things, Surely the fiercest survivor, the purest warrior, glaring, hating, claiming me as your own. This right here is not Batman. Until Frank Miller got his hands on him, that was not Batman. You had no idea what that was. A driven individual, sure, but a supernaturally haunted individual of a giant bat spirit that lives in the Batcave? This badly, badly wounded Batman goes to the Batcave, and it is heavily implied that this spirit of whatever's in the Batcave heals him and makes him better, so that he no longer has the profuse inner bleeding. He no longer needs instant hospitalization. He's badly banged up, yes, but he's made better. He's healed. While that is happening, Miller gives us an odd misstep on his part, something that could better have been handled with a blob of dialogue rather than 2 whole pages. He gives us incidences of ordinary citizens of Gotham either being driven to violence by the fact that Batman has returned, or being driven to acts of heroism by the fact that Batman has returned, or both. And it goes on a little long, and it's not as well written as Frank Miller thinks it is, so... Sorry, I'm not going to shout over the siren. Every video is going to have a little pause while I wait for a siren to scream by, and then I'll come back. Okay, I'm back. These things are not as well written as Frank Miller thinks they are, and they take up way too much space. We shift to the mutant leader in jail. There's the nose that Batman broke. The mayor goes in to treat with him, and the mutant leader rips his throat out with his bare teeth. We get a lieutenant mayor who's now acting mayor. So we know that the mutants are out of control and need dealing with, and so does Bruce Wayne. His first encounter with the mutant leader went horribly. He knows that. He needs to make it go right, and in order to do that, he needs to rethink things. There we have a great visual of the bat signal for the very last time up on Gotham Towers, and his very last consultation with Jim Gordon, chief of police, the police commissioner, before Gordon retires and the future takes over. They hatch a plan. Gordon goes to the cell of the mutant leader and says, "I've come to say goodbye." Then he leaves, the lights shut off, the door opens, and the mutant leader hears a voice calling him to a sewage pipe. He follows the sewage pipe to the dump, where all the mutants have gathered, and so has Batman. For round 2, in a mud pile, in a pit of mud. In other words, as Batman says, no one is very fast when they're up to their knees in mud. So Batman has chosen the ground, and he's thought about it. He's not charging in now as a bruiser who's the same age as this guy. Instead, he's fighting not like a young man, but like a seasoned fighter, like Batman. He's learning his opponent's vulnerabilities. He still takes a little bit of a beating in the fight, but he is fully in control. He fights with his brain instead of anything else in this issue. And he does it in front of all of the mutants. They watch what's happening as he takes their leader apart. One of the famous lines here, quoted over and over again, is that this mud puddle, this is a mud puddle, it's an operating table, and I'm the surgeon. And he destroys the mutant leader, breaks all his bones and whatnot, and instantly gains the loyalty of all of the mutants, who changed their Cyclops visor to a bat tattoo on their face. He instantly gains their loyalty. And one little detail that you might not see if you weren't paying attention here, I want to show you the contrast so that you know what I'm talking about here. This is the scene of Batman confronting the mutant leader the first time. And this is the scene of Batman triumphing over the mutant leader the second time. Notice the bright yellow circle is gone from around the bat insignia on his chest. The costume has been redesigned. Even after Frank Miller has told us that it had a practical reason, there is a practical reason to put a target on your chest so that people will shoot at it instead of shooting at your face. Even so, that's gone. And I don't know if that isn't an intentional visual signifier that Batman has changed. Because this Batman certainly has changed. Torturing a villain in single combat after you have incapacitated him, killing people en masse, killing someone who has kidnapped a baby, shooting them with his own gun. All of this seems to be intentionally putting a little girl in the line of fire. All of this seems to be Miller's Batman taking over for anybody else's Batman. And it gives a momentum to this story. Obviously, you know that a bigger story is at work here now, because the mutants are now pledging their allegiance to Batman. The Joker is going to be let loose on the public. Superman is going to get involved. You now know there's a bigger story percolating here. But one of the plot lines that comes to an end here is that Jim Gordon retires. And the new police commissioner considers Batman a vigilante and wants to bring him in. There is a sequence, there's a page here where Jim Gordon tries to explain Batman to his replacement, a young woman who is not vilified. Miller doesn't make her a villain. She's not portrayed as a bad guy at all. And Gordon tries to explain why he tolerates Batman. And it has to do with FDR and the bombing of Pearl Harbor. And after all this time reading it, it still makes no sense to me at all. What I think Miller is trying to say, I think what he's trying to have Gordon say, is that if you are a civilian who is in touch with one of these mythical beings of the DC continuity, Superman, if Wonder Woman works in your town, or if Batman has always been with you on the job fighting crime in Gotham, then it feels bigger than you are. It feels mythological in a way that you would never have someone say in Marvel Comics, where I am pretty sure the Rhino's aunt used to often have tea in Kew Gardens with Peter Parker's aunt. Or, you know, where no one except Thor can ever have delusions of godhood because they're all from the same, PS44. Whereas in DC, there is this element of that the characters are bigger than life, that the superheroes are more mythological. We have seen that's not the case here, but even so, that is Gordon's thought, I think, in the soliloquy here. Maybe one of you understands it better than I do. I think that's what he's alluding to, is that Batman is bigger than law enforcement, he's bigger than Gotham, he's bigger than the police, and that you just have to go with it. You just have to accept that. One way or another, it's odd, and the issue ends with him retiring. And it's very poignant what he says. He says, when I think of Bruce, then I wish they hadn't retired me. He's finished, and there's no way to tell him that. No point, I guess. I won't be seeing him again. I mean, sure, I'll see him. He's just that close to polite. But I'm out of the picture now. I'm out of his picture. That's the end that we see of Gordon for now. He doesn't leave the series. He'll be back. But we see him leaving, and we see him just matter-of-factly saying that Bruce Wayne is finished. Batman is finished, and just doesn't know it. He just doesn't know it. The implication being that Batman would always have been finished if the police was against him. If the structure of the police in Gotham considered him to be just as much of a villain as Two-Face, that he would never have got very far. One way or another, that's one element on the final page of this issue, and the other element is Bruce Wayne, who very much thinks the opposite. He is standing at a window in stately Wayne Manor, and he says, "Frogs croak like a cartoon car alarm. Crickets pick up the chorus. A wolf howls. I know how he feels." With that hungry, evil smile on his face. This is a new Batman that we have seen. No Commissioner Gordon to help him anymore. No bat signal up in the air. No, nothing like that. No coordinating with Gordon in order to take down a menace. Instead, something different. A wolf howls. I know how he feels. I'll leave aside whether or not there are any wolves within calling distance of Wayne Manor at the time this story takes place. One way or another, it, I think, is a tremendously more effective ending than the ending of the first segment. The ending of the second segment makes you eager for the third segment. Except me. I was eager for, I shouldn't revise my memories. I was eager for the third segment, but I was also dreading it. Because now I know that Superman's going to be involved, and I know that Frank Miller has only one thought about Superman, and that is that he's a super cop, a super sellout. And I dreaded that. This Batman is presented to be the absolute pinnacle of cool. One way or another, when I first read this issue, I thought, oh, well, so maybe he'll have a tone-deaf rendition of Superman. It never in a million years occurred to me that Frank Miller was going to set up a spectrum of cool with Batman at one end, Superman at the other, and the Joker at Batman's end. That never occurred to me at all. We'll get to it. It doesn't, believe it or not, ruin things. This is still great. Anyway, that is the second part of Dark Knight Returns, and we will be back next weekend for the third part. The third part has a lot more of Superman for me to talk to you about, but a lot more other things too, because we're done now with the distractions. You get the sense that this was, whether or not Frank Miller originally plotted it this way, you get the sense that this was always going to be a story about Batman, the Joker, and Superman. And you've only had faint hints of that in the first 2 issues. The first issue was Two-Face. The second issue was the mutants. Those things have been cleared away. Now we can focus. The next 2 issues focus on one story and one story only. Really, when you get down to it, Superman and the Joker are 2 sides of one story. But we'll discuss all that next week. I've gone on way too long. That is Batman Dark Knight Returns Part 2. Tune in next week. Same bat time, same bat channel for Part 3. Matthew and I will be doing it. Michael Crystal Vaughn will be weighing in, I'm sure. Maybe a couple of other people will be. You are welcome to do this. If you have a copy of Dark Knight Returns sitting on your shelf, read the first 2 chapters and make a video. I'd love to hear what you think of it. I'd love to hear that. Like, for instance, I didn't even know that Michael Vaughn existed a year ago. And yet, he has given, I've never met him in person, I probably never will, but he has already given me a great line. Something that will inform my thinking of this series from now on, which is Batman is not the Punisher. That's great. And Matthew said a few observations, too, that from the eyes of someone who's looking at all of this brand new. I would love to see a video if you want to do it. So feel free. I'm going to shut up now, so I will be back. Thank you.